It was supposed to be a takedown. Kash Patel, former federal prosecutor, chief of staff to the Secretary of Defense, and a key national security figure, had been subpoenaed to appear before a federal tribunal. The charge? Obstruction of classified oversight and unauthorized retention of government material. The headlines had already written the verdict. Kash Patel faces reckoning in federal court. Patel's secret files could send him to prison. Once the gatekeeper, now the scapegoat. They said it was open and shut. But that was before the binder. The courtroom was packed. Cameras weren't allowed, but reporters filled every inch of gallery space. Judge Melanie Harrington, a strict federalist known for iron discipline, entered without glancing at Patel. The prosecution had rehearsed for weeks. Patel? He sat quietly at the defense table, a black binder resting at his side, his face unreadable. They thought it was his notes. They didn't know it was the memo. The opening statement from the government was fiery, dramatic, and carefully choreographed for news headlines. This is not about politics. It's about principle. Mr. Patel had no authority to retain or share classified intelligence. Kash didn't even blink, because he knew something none of them did. He didn't just have authority, he had the proof. Kash Patel didn't interrupt. He didn't roll his eyes, didn't sigh, didn't even flinch. He waited, patiently, as the prosecution hammered him with accusations. He endangered national security, he circumvented protocol, he withheld classified intelligence. Judge Harrington sat upright, stone-faced behind the bench. "Mr. Patel, you may now respond." The courtroom held its breath. Kash stood slowly. "Your Honor," he said, "I understand the gravity of this proceeding, but I also understand something else." He placed his hand on the black binder. "This trial is built on assumption. What I'm about to show you is built on documentation." He unzipped the binder. Every neck in the room craned forward. He slid a thick tabbed folder toward the clerk. "Declassified memorandum, dated 6 months before I left the Department of Defense." Signed by the Secretary, copied to National Intelligence and White House Counsel. Murmurs rippled across the gallery. The judge raised her hand. "Quiet," Kash continued. "This document doesn't just authorize my access. It records the briefing where I was directed to retain, secure, and transmit intelligence relating to a covert interagency operation." He paused, then looked directly at the prosecutor. "The operation that your own office just denied existed." Boom! The defense attorney, who hadn't said a word in 30 minutes, slid the document into the evidence stack. Judge Harrington squinted at the memo. She read the signature. Then the code. Top secret, Psi, Orcon NF. Her eyes narrowed. "Mr. Patel, where did you obtain this?" "From the archive your office said didn't exist," he said. "I have the chain of custody, clearance log, and a notarized affidavit. All in the binder." He gestured to it again. "The story changes now." In the back, one junior clerk dropped her pen. 2 reporters rushed for the door to file updates, because they just realized what everyone else was starting to suspect. This wasn't a defense. This was a reveal. Judge Harrington stared at the memo. Her brow furrowed, not out of confusion but recognition. She'd seen this clearance level before. Not in a courtroom, in a skiff, a sensitive compartmented information facility. Documents like this don't just exist outside of secure spaces, unless someone with real authority authorized it. She tapped her gavel twice. "Recess. Council. Chambers. Now." Inside her chambers, the walls were lined with law books and plaques, but for the first time in her career, her authority felt insufficient. The prosecutor was red-faced. "Your Honor, we were told these documents were sealed." "They were," she cut him off, "or at least they were supposed to be." She turned to Patel. "How did you get this?" He calmly unzipped the second flap of his binder and handed her a thin envelope. Inside, a notarized letter from the former Secretary of Defense, stamped with official clearance markings and a transfer log of intelligence protocols. She read it slowly, twice. Then Judge Harrington looked up and whispered something she hadn't said in 20 years on the bench. "We may have been prosecuting the wrong man." Outside the chamber, news had already broken. One reporter leaked the phrase they'd overheard just before the doors closed. He brought the actual memo. Social media exploded. The binder, Kash classified, trial over. In the hallway, Defense Department aides were making calls. Someone in a suit whispered, "If that memo's real, this isn't just about Patel. This is about everyone who signed off on it." And in the chamber, Judge Harrington took off her glasses and leaned back. Mr. Patel, when court resumes, I will ask one question, and if the answer is yes, this trial ends today. Court reconvened 30 minutes later, but the room had changed. The energy wasn't combative now. It was electric, hushed, every eye focused on the binder still sitting in front of Kash Patel. Judge Harrington adjusted her robe and leaned into the microphone. Mr. Patel, she said, slow and deliberate, this court has reviewed the memorandum you submitted. It is signed by the former Secretary of Defense, classified at the highest level, and accompanied by a declassification order. Before we proceed further, I have one question. You could hear a pin drop. Did you receive explicit verbal authorization to retain these materials from the National Security Council? Kash didn't hesitate. Yes, Your Honor. From whom? Kash looked directly at her and said the name, the National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan. The room imploded. Reporters lunged for their phones. The court recorder dropped her keystroke rhythm. Even Judge Harrington blinked once and sat back. Sullivan was a sitting official, a direct link between the West Wing and U.S. intelligence services. If what Kash just said was true, then this wasn't just a mismanaged case, it was a misdirected trial. A prosecutor stood up. Objection. That name cannot be introduced without verification. Harrington raised her hand. You've had 6 months to verify the story. Mr. Patel verified it in 3 pages. She turned to the gallery. This court is suspending all charges pending independent intelligence review. Court is adjourned, effective immediately. Gasps, stunned silence, and then, shouting from the hallway, the words echoed from a stunned reporter near the exit. He ended the trial with one sentence. Kash zipped the binder closed and calmly walked out. No smile, no swagger, just truth, delivered like a hammer. By the time Kash Patel reached the courthouse steps, the internet had already exploded. Trial ends instantly after Kash reveals NSC authorization. Jake Sullivan's name dropped in open court, stuns legal world. The binder exposes everything. Cable news anchors scrambled to reframe the story. What had begun as a prosecution of a former defense official for mishandling classified documents was now a national security scandal involving active White House leadership. Outside, protesters had gathered, some furious, some in awe. On one side, no one's above the law signs. On the other, he brought the truth, they brought a trap. That night, Kash was trending #1 worldwide. Clips from the courtroom leaked. Not official footage, but grainy audio from someone in the back who had captured the moment. He said, Jake Sullivan. It was only 2 words, but the impact was seismic. Meanwhile, across town, a bombshell dropped. A former assistant deputy to the Secretary of Defense appeared on a major news network. A quiet man, not known for theatrics. I was in the room, he said calmly. Patel didn't act alone. He was executing orders. The memo was real. The briefing was real. The authorization was verbal, signed off and recorded. The anchor blinked in disbelief. You're saying this entire prosecution was built on a lie? No, the deputy said. It was built on selective memory. That clip hit 15 million views in 4 hours. Political podcasts exploded. Think tanks scrambled. Senators called emergency briefings. Because suddenly the question wasn't, did Kash Patel break the law? The question was, who told DOJ to go after him and why? The lights in the West Wing Situation Room were dimmed. The mood was not. At the head of the table sat White House Chief of Staff Elena Brody, flanked by national security aides, legal counsel and communications directors, all talking over each other. How did this not go through final clearance? Who okayed the subpoena? He wasn't supposed to have that memo, let alone use it. Then the room fell silent. Jake Sullivan entered. Not flustered, not angry, just still. He sat down. We knew he had the memo, he said calmly. We just didn't think he'd bring it. A stunned aide asked, why? Sullivan's answer was devastating, because most people flinch before lighting a fire this big, but Kash Patel didn't flinch. Across town, intelligence lawyers were going into overdrive. Phone records were being pulled, briefing logs analysed, security officers privately asking, how many more of these binders exist? Back in the media world, Tash the Binder wasn't just trending. It was becoming a symbol. Influencers, veterans, activists all asked the same question. What else did they hide? How many other trials were misdirected, and why did they pick him as the fall guy? On Capitol Hill, Senator J.D. Vance tweeted, "A courtroom just revealed what oversight couldn't. One man brought receipts, the system brought theatre, and now the audience wants answers." It went viral. 160,000 retweets, 1.4 million likes. The receipts trended for 2 straight days. In a closed hearing that same night, a staffer whispered to a senator, "We might need to choose between defending the court or defending the cover-up." 3 days after the trial ended, the full memo leaked online. It wasn't leaked by Kash, it wasn't leaked by the defense. It was leaked by someone inside the intelligence community, and it sent a political lightning bolt across DC. The document was identical to the one Kash submitted in court, except one thing. A previously redacted name was now visible. It wasn't a staffer. It wasn't a military aide. It was someone much bigger, a sitting cabinet official. The name Sec. Alejandro Ramirez, Homeland Security. Ramirez's signature was just below Sullivan's. It wasn't speculation anymore. 2 of the nation's top national security figures had signed off on Kash Patel's access and retention of the classified material. 2 of the very people whose agencies had helped build the case against him. The country watched, stunned. Cable news anchors froze mid-segment. One said quietly, "They tried to bury him with a trial they knew wasn't legal, and he brought the paperwork." Kash finally gave one interview. One network, a single chair, one camera, dim lighting. He sat forward and said, "This was never about a document. This was about a government that thought silence was the safest outcome. But silence is what lets corruption grow." Then he added, "I was willing to go to prison to tell the truth, but the truth didn't need a lawyer, it needed a flashlight." That sentence, clipped and uploaded by a 17-year-old on TikTok, hit 10 million views in 8 hours. Flashlight over fear, Patel speaks, binder justice. The Capitol dome glowed well past midnight as members of Congress filed into a hastily assembled closed-door emergency hearing. No press, no cameras, just whispered warnings, tense folders, and fear of what came next. Because now it was no longer about Kash Patel. The leaked memo and the redacted clearance logs that followed revealed something much larger. Multiple officials had been investigated quietly, off the books, without their knowledge. And they had something in common. Each had questioned the intelligence establishment. Each had publicly criticized unchecked surveillance power. And each had, at some point, worked near classified audits. Then came the staffer. He wasn't scheduled to testify, but he showed up anyway. A 26-year-old former intern in the Office of Legal Counsel, anonymous, nervous, carrying a flash drive. He dropped it on the table. They built a hit list, he said, of people who were too loud, they're too curious, or too close to things they weren't supposed to see. The room fell silent. He added, Patel was just the first. Within 24 hours, 3 federal judges called for independent reviews. 6 lawmakers demanded a special counsel. The Attorney General declined comment, but his press secretary resigned unexpectedly. Across the country, people lit up message boards with one question. If they tried this on someone with top clearance, what could they do to the rest of us? A clip of Kash's lawyer on morning TV broke the internet. This was never a trial. It was an ambush. But Kash Patel brought facts to a knife fight, and they ran out of lies. The room was packed. Every major network had sent their top anchors. Cameras rolled, tripods jammed against one another, a helicopter circled above. At the center of the chaos stood Kash Patel, behind a podium bearing no party insignia, just a simple sign, declassified, let the people see. He hadn't spoken live since the trial ended. But now, with the nation holding its breath, he opened the black binder one final time. "I'm not here to argue anymore," he began. "I'm here to read you something the government never thought you'd hear." He flipped to the back page of the memo, the one still blurred in most online leaks. This was the summary line from the National Security Council's intelligence briefing, delivered to me, signed by 2 senior officials. He cleared his throat, and then he read the line. "In the event this document is ever requested in court, its contents must be denied by default to preserve narrative integrity." The room froze. Even the microphones seemed to go silent. One reporter shouted from the back, "What does that mean, narrative integrity?" Kash looked up slowly. "It means the truth was less important than the story. It means this memo was never meant to be seen, not by Congress, not by judges, and certainly not by the public. You could feel it, the shift. In that moment, it wasn't just about documents. It was about how far people in power were willing to go to control what we believe is real. Another journalist asked, "So what happens now?" Kash didn't flinch. "Now," he said, "now they answer our questions." By the time the press conference ended, the memo was downloaded 8.6 million times. The DOJ's official website went offline. Congressional offices received over 300,000 calls in 12 hours. Across Twitter, one phrase echoed louder than any headline: "Preserve narrative integrity." Only now, it wasn't a strategy, it was a confession. 2 weeks after the press conference, Washington wasn't just shaken, it was cracked. Multiple resignations followed: the Deputy Attorney General, a high-ranking Homeland Security official, 2 federal prosecutors who helped craft the original case. Senate hearings opened. Public trust in federal institutions dropped to its lowest since Watergate. And in the middle of it all, Kash Patel never raised his voice, never claimed victory, never said, "I told you so." When a 60-minute-style interview finally landed, the whole country watched. The journalist leaned forward. "Kash, you were nearly imprisoned. You were dragged through headlines. You were called a traitor, an extremist, a threat to national security." She paused. "And then you proved them wrong with a single memo. So here's the question everyone wants to know. Would you do it again?" Kash didn't hesitate. "Yes." "Even knowing the cost?" He nodded. "Truth always has a cost, but so does silence, and it costs everyone else." The clip aired Sunday night. By Monday morning, the phrase was trending globally. Truth has a cost, but so does silence. His binder was requested for museum archiving. Law schools across the country taught the case as a modern lesson in whistleblower defense and constitutional oversight. The courtroom sketch from day one, Kash placing the binder on the table, was reproduced, printed and framed in living rooms, offices and police stations nationwide. And at the bottom of the frame, etched in small lettering, "Let the record show. The truth didn't break the system. It revealed who already had."